look, there's precious little for the Tories to smile about here. I mean, what's the glint of light amid all this darkness for the Conservatives?
Yeah.
I
was thinking, after all the hullabaloo of last week and the local elections, maybe this week would be slightly quieter. But some breaking news. The Tory MP, Natalie Elphicke, has defected to the Labour Party, hitting out at what she called the broken promises of Rishi Sunak's tired and chaotic government. Patrick, what can you tell us?
I can tell you that my flabber is absolutely gasted, Matt. Obviously, Natalie Elphicke has been the Conservative MP for Dover since 2019. Husband, of course, her ex-husband, of course, is Chorley Elphicke, the convicted sex offender who used to sit for that seat. She's probably one of the last people you would expect to have defected to the Labour Party, not least because she has been at the forefront of the Tory efforts to have tougher measures on migration. But that, for Keir Starmer, who I believe is going to be asking questions about the Rwanda scheme and migration today anyway, is a significant boost, a significant vote of confidence in his party. And you see from what Natalie Elphicke says in her statement, talking about Rishi Sunak's tired administration, this only reinforces the idea that there's one result of the next general election, and it's not the one Rishi Sunak keeps telling us that it's still in play.
I'm just having a look actually at her seat and how close it is.
Well, it was held by Labour until 2010. Labour now control the council. It was one of the bright spots in the 2021 local elections, which were otherwise awful for the Labour Party.
And in the she's got a majority of 12,000, but like you said,
I mean that's chump change now.
Yeah. Exactly. We've seen that double that overturned.
Well, Dover is exactly the sort of seat Keir Starmer is outperforming in. It's a Leave seat. It's in deep England, as you might call it. These are the seats that Keir Starmer's electoral coalition is now made up of, and it's if Natalie Elphicke wants to stay in Parliament, which clearly she does, it's not surprising that she's chosen to change her allegiance to the Labour Party.
I mean, are her politics that close to Keir Starmer? She's in this statement talking about how the Conservatives once occupied the centre ground of British politics, but things have changed. The elected Prime Minister ousted in a coup led by the unelected Rishi Sunak. So, but I mean, her politics, I'd have put her more on the right of the party. I mean, partly because of where she is, MP
exactly.
Dover, but her position on sort of small boats, illegal migration. Am I reading that wrong?
Well, it's interesting. You could say that is a function of geography, that she is perceived as being on the right of the Conservative Party because the local politics of Dover necessitate her adopting that sort of position. I don't think you can get re-elected or hope for re-election as a Conservative in Dover talking about open borders, given the demographics of that seat. But it's interesting. There's a lot about housing in her statement about defecting to the Labour Party. And people with long memories may remember in 2013 she conducted a review of housing finance for the coalition government. So she may say, I'm sure she will say when she's interviewed in this, look, I'm an expert in the housing sector. Planning is at the forefront of the Labour Party's policy offer, and I really want to use my professional expertise, given her career in Parliament has been pretty dramatic, given what's happened to her ex-husband and, the circumstances in her seat. She may want to say, look, I'm a serious corporate lawyer who has expertise in this area and I want to contribute to our incoming government.
So if you're just tuning in, the breaking news just ahead of PMQs, the Labour MP, Natalie Elphicke, the MP for Dover and Deal, has defected to the Conservative Party, accusing Rishi Sunak of being behind the coup to oust Boris Johnson. Under Rishi Sunak, the Conservatives have become a byword for incompetence and division. The centre ground has been abandoned and key pledges of the 2019 manifesto ditched.
Can I just say, though, it's worth, let's not define Natalie Elphicke by her surname, but she was suspended from the Commons for a day in 2021 for trying to influence the judge, along with several other Conservative MPs in her then husband's sentencing. So it'd be interesting. Keir Starmer has a very trenchant and persistent critique of the morals of the Conservative Party. It'd be interesting to see how he talks about this when he's asked about it, which he inevitably will be.
Well, here we go then. It's a pretty dramatic start to PMQs. We had last week, Rishi Sunak got quite a big laugh by taking the mickey out of Dan Poulter, who defected to the Conservatives, from the Conservatives to Labour, saying it made a nice change to see him in the Commons. How will he deal with this shock defection right before PMQs? Let's go live to the House of Commons now. Question 1 from Keir Starmer.
We now come to leave the opposition, Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, can I warmly welcome the new member for Blackpool South? after the representation that fine town has had recently, it's good to know they've got a proper champion back at last. Can I also warmly welcome the new Labour MP for Dover to these benches? Mr. Speaker, if 1 week a Tory MP who's also a doctor says the Prime Minister can't be trusted with the NHS and joins Labour, and the next week the Tory MP for Dover, on the front line of the small boats crisis, says the Prime Minister cannot be trusted with our borders and joins Labour, what is the point of this failed government staggering on?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I actually join him in welcoming his newest MP for Blackpool? I must say he looks a lot happier than the member who was sitting there last week. But let me also join with him, and let me join with him in congratulating all new and paying tribute to all former councillors, PCCs and mayors across the country. I hope his new ones do him as proud as I am of all of mine, Mr. Speaker. Great leaders like Andy Street, who leave behind a strong legacy of more homes, more jobs and more investment, in sharp contrast to the legacy left by the last Labour government, which was a letter joking that there was no money left.
She said that sounds a bit croaky.
Maybe
he's been screaming moments before. What's happened now?
Oliver Dowden, I mean, he's not a man given to Cheshire Cat grins, but he looks like he's, just served 8 years in NAM.
It's notable that when Keir Starmer pointed to Natalie Elphicke on the benches behind him, several Tory MPs looked quite baffled. They hadn't noticed that one of their own had defected.
Well, and she would probably be the last person they expected to. I mean, I've got getting a lot of texts from Labour people right now. One of them just reads, well. A lot of smugness on the Labour benches right now, as you would expect. It's difficult to pay that much attention to these exchanges. Rishi Sunak trying to put a brave face on the ejection of Andy Street there, when the most incongruous defection in living memory has just happened and is playing out behind Keir Starmer.
Well, let's go back. I mean, he asked, "What's the point of this government?" But then Rishi said, "I just completely ignored that and paid tribute to Andy Street."
Andy Street, who was, who ran Labour so close in the West Midlands precisely because he defined himself against the government.
In addition to losing 2 Tory MPs in 2 weeks, the Prime Minister's been on the receiving end of some of the biggest by-election swings in history. He's also lost 1,500 Tory councillors, half of his party's mayors, and a leadership election to a lettuce. How many more times do the public and his own MPs need to reject him before he takes the hint?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this time last year I reminded him of some advice, actually, from his own mentor, Tony Blair, who had said at the time that he can be as cocky as he likes about local elections, but come a general election, it's policy that counts, Mr. Speaker. Now, one year on from that advice, what has he managed? £28 billion of tax rises, 70 new business regulations, 30 U-turns, and a deputy leader under a police investigation.
I mean, he's doing his best in a slightly tricky situation. Keir Starmer, it's so interesting, Keir Starmer. When he's, up against it, he's hopeless. When he's got the wind in his sails like this, I mean, he is bordering on cocky. How many times does he need to be rejected by his own MPs and the public before he takes the hint?
Well, everybody who knows Keir Starmer well, everybody who works with Keir Starmer says he's a confidence player, which bears out the analysis you just offered, and he is at the top of his game today. And look, the Labour Party is shifting, and this is quite dangerous for Rishi Sunak. Is shifting in position where they're just openly mocking the Conservative Party. That is the theme we're already seeing in this session of PMQs. We're also seeing it in what the stuff the Labour Party are now putting out. It's sort of attack, but derisive attack. And that's the most dangerous thing for Rishi Sunak, is that not only have the public stopped listening to him, and they do listen to him, they think he's a bit of a joke.
We should point out this quote. Rishi Sunak's used this a couple of times now, aimed at Keir Starmer, saying he can be as cocky as he likes about the local elections, but come a general election, policy counts. So that Tony Blair did say that, but not about Keir Starmer, which is what that impression gives. He said it in 2007 to David Cameron, when David Cameron was cock-a-hoop about some local election results. And so Tony Blair at PMQ said to David Cameron, he can be as cocky as he likes about the local elections. Come a general election, policy counts. On policy, we win and he loses. But anyway, it's just an interesting, quite why they've reached so far back.
But it's interesting that he followed that up not with an exposition of all the great policy he's trying to push through Parliament in what remains of this session, but with a partisan attack on the Labour Party and Angela Rayner and all of that sort of thing. You know, and this gets to the heart of what you hear from Tory MPs, which is, you know, even if we're going long and the general election is going to be in autumn or winter, or even in, you know, the first month of 2025, what are we using this time for? It reminds me of what Paul Scully was saying on your exit interview the other day. You know, what are we doing with parliamentary time? And the answer is not very much.
Actually, if you look at some of the quotes from David Cameron in 2007, challenging Tony Blair, he said, "I don't know why members of the cabinet are shouting. The Chancellor's spin doctors are wandering around the lobby handing out all their jobs. This is the government of the living dead. Why do we have to put up with even more paralysis?" So, you know, what goes around comes around and all that.
Well, I'm surprised he brought up a police investigation. I think his record is played one, no, actually two, the seatbelt as well. Played two, lost two in relation to police investigations. But it's the same. The public keep telling him, the voters tell him it's not good enough. Instead of listening, he keeps telling them everything's fine, if only they'd realise his greatness. He just doesn't get it. But at least after Thursday night, Mr. Speaker, he can go to the many places that he calls home and enjoy the fruits of his success. In Southampton or Downing Street, he's got great Labour councils. At his mansion in Richmond, he can enjoy a brand new Labour mayor of North Yorkshire. And at his pad in Kensington, he can celebrate a historic third term for the Mayor of London. Now that he too can enjoy the benefits of this changed Labour Party, is he really still in such a hurry to get back to California?
Mr. Speaker, I must say I was of course surprised to see the honourable gentleman in North Yorkshire, but probably not as surprised as he was when he realised he couldn't take the tube there, Mr. Speaker. But I can tell him that the people of North Yorkshire believe in hard work, secure borders, lower taxes and straight-talking common sense, Mr. Speaker. They're not going to get any of that from a virtue-signalling lawyer from North London.
It's like they forgot to prep for this, and so he's just grabbed like some old notes.
You know, that's his all-purpose attack line on Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you listen to Tory MPs over the weekend, what's consistent in all of their lines is, well, there's no great love out there for Keir Starmer, you know, which reminds me that the cover of Private Eye this week nails that very well. Passengers on the Titanic saying there's no great love for the iceberg, which is a very good joke. But you know, you're seeing here that the only levers Rishi Sunak has left to pull in the election campaign, which is, and I feel ridiculous even saying this, which is try and emphasise the personal contest between the two, because you know, you look at his personal ratings, they're not great, Keir Starmer, but ultimately people dislike the Conservative Party more than anything else.
It's a relativity game. This, I thought it was slightly bold of Keir Starmer taking the mic, so you can go to the many places he calls home, while Angela Rayner's sitting next to him, and she can't seem to remember where she lives. But she was sort of laughing along, enjoying it. If Oliver Dowden looked downbeat at the beginning, I think it's fair to say he's taken a turn for the worst.
I think Oliver Dowden
properly miserable.
Oliver Dowden, I think, is among the people in Downing Street who think the Prime Minister would have been best served calling the election for last month. And there are lots of people in Downing Street who've come to that view.
Just get it over with.
Just look, it's only getting worse. Let's get it over with. And you know, for the first PMQs after that slated general election date to involve Natalie Elphicke defecting, I think is testament to the wisdom of that case, maybe.
Well, here we are then. So Natalie Elphicke, Conservative MP for Dover and Deal, has defected to the Labour Party. He's sitting behind Keir Starmer, who seems, I think it's fair to say, cock-a-hoop.
It was great to be in Northallerton, where they just voted to reject the Prime Minister's proposition. Mr. Speaker, he's finally found something in common with the British public. No matter where he calls home, all his neighbours are backing this changed Labour Party. And they keep rejecting him because they have sussed him out. They know there's nothing behind the boasts, the gimmicks, the smug smile. He's a dodgy salesman, desperate to sell them a dud. Now, Mr. Speaker, 16 days ago, when he held a press conference claiming victory on Rwanda, he said the next few weeks will be about action. People want deeds, not words. So let's test that. How many small boat crossings have there been since he said that 16 days ago?
Mr. Speaker, actually, just before we go on to that, he talked about a change. He talked about a changed Labour Party. That's important because he talked about a changed Labour Party. He talks about it a lot. But just this morning, and he also talked about his new mayor in London. So just this morning, we've learned that the Labour mayor in London believes, and I quote, that there is an equivalence between the brutal terrorist attack of Hamas and Israel defending itself. And let me be crystal clear. There is absolutely no equivalence between a terrorist coup and a democratic state. So can I ask him now, will he take this opportunity to demonstrate that that Labour Party has changed? And will he condemn those comments from the Labour mayor?
So he didn't come to the question of small boats, which he said he was going to come to in a minute. Interestingly, Keir Starmer trying to sort of steer the conversation back onto an actual policy, which he knows causes endless problems for Rishi Sunak and his own MPs.
Yes, but the flip side of that is they're exchanging partisan jibes about the local elections. And that was bad for Rishi Sunak too, and has caused no amount of anxiety. You know, not least the fact that Rishi Sunak now has a Labour mayor in North Yorkshire, which is not what anybody expected. And it's quite rum for the Prime Minister to raise Sadiq Khan, given that, you know, some Tories spent last week very excitedly briefing that Susan Hall was going to win, and that Sadiq Khan was really unpopular. And you know, he was right for the taking. You know, even in attacking Sadiq Khan, he draws attention to you know, their sort of pretty shoddy handling of the local elections generally.
Well, the reaction to Natalie Elphicke's defection is already rolling in before PMQs has even finished. Andrea Jenkins, a long-standing critic of Rishi Sunak's call for him to go, she's just tweeted at Natalie Elphicke, "You were a centre-right Conservative. Labour want to give asylum to 50,000 plus people. I thought you had more conviction than to join the lefty Labour lot you despised so much." And he's attached a news story with the headline, "Don't trust Labour on immigration. They really want open borders," warns Natalie Elphicke.
You know, it's always the occupational hazard of being a defector, isn't it? That you will have, especially in a place like Dover, you will have criticised your opponents in quite trenchant terms. Let me read you a message. Let me read you a message from a senior Labour MP who describes this as all strategy and no substance, and not even good strategy. Peeling off one nation Tories makes sense and speaks to a moderate, sensible Labour Party. And Natalie Elphicke is very much not that. I'm sensing some discomfort in bits of the Labour Party about Natalie Elphicke, given the sort of Conservative MP she is, given the biographical complications we were talking about earlier. But I imagine the calculation of the people at the top of the Labour Party was the propaganda fillip we get from this, particularly if she's not standing at the next general election anyway, beats a couple of days of awkward questions on this stuff.
And actually, you know, they had one last week, they have one this week, they have one next week. Everyone forgets who the individuals were, and it just becomes this idea of
just general, you know, another Tory MP has defected, and you know, it's a great fillip for Mike Tapp, who is the former Royal Marine standing for Labour in Dover. And you know, to say, look, we've got a Labour council, and people are so even the Tories know that we're the best choice for this very evocative and troubled bit of England, given that she's defected as well.
I know that was the last run out before the general election, but he's getting ahead of himself in asking me questions. But Mr. Speaker, I notice he didn't even attempt to answer the question. He knows the answer. Since he claimed victory 16 days ago, there have been a staggering 2,400 small boat crossings. 2,400! That's a gimmick, not a deterrent. And those 2,400 will be added to the Tories' asylum perma-backlog, which is forecast to rise to 100,000 by the end of this year. Now, the Prime Minister pretends he will remove them all to Rwanda. But Rwanda can only take a few hundred a year. At that rate, the Prime Minister's grand plan would take over 300 years to remove them all. Mr. Speaker, that's tens of thousands of people with their claims going unprocessed, who are going to be here for their entire lifetime living in hotels at the taxpayers' expense. It is absurd to call that anything other than an amnesty handed to them by the Tory party, isn't it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, he had the opportunity to condemn the comments of his mayor, a mayor who said that there is an equivalence between Hamas and Israel. He did not do that, and everyone will see what that is. That is the Change Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, right there. But since I became Prime Minister, small boat crossings are down by a third. That's because we've doubled NCA funding, increased enforcement rates, closed bank accounts, deported 24,000 people, processed more claims, and, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to border control, there is a crucial difference between us. We want secure borders. He's happy with open borders.
On the substance of this, Rishi Sunak's just wrong now, isn't he? There was a point where the number of boats crossing was down by a third.
And that's very much not the case now.
But that's not the case now. You can't keep saying what was the case in November when the number that have crossed so far this year is the highest it's ever been.
Well, that's the problem. That's the problem for Rishi Sunak. I'm sure he might be corrected in due course. And it's clear that, you know, despite what's happening in Ireland, it's not immediately clear that the Rwanda has had any deterrent effect. Even the prospect of the Rwanda scheme beginning in due course had any deterrent effect on numbers, which, as you say, are not going down. And, you know, look at the weather here in the southeast of England today. I imagine it's, you know, we're entering a period where they're only going to go up and up and up, which is another risk of going long for Rishi Sunak.
I meant to mention this before, but in the last question, Keir Starmer described the Prime Minister as a dodgy salesman. Desperate to sell them a dud, which is also lots of alliteration. But Dennis Skinner got kicked out of the Commons for calling the Prime Minister Dodgy Dave. I thought dodgy was
unparliamentary,
a bit dodgy in Parliament.
It's very interesting. Maybe it's the metaphor, or using it as an analogy. He's like a dodgy salesman. It's not the same as calling him dodgy Rishi. I don't know though. Incidentally, Lindsay Hall's been very quiet today.
Yeah.
Not like him.
Maybe he's defected.
Defecting back to the Labour Party.
It's pretty extraordinary, this. Rishi Sunak, battling on his way through PMQs. Natalie Elphicke. I suppose the other smart thing about announcing Natalie Elphicke's defection at this point is that rather than doing it the weekend, which is what they did with Dan Poulton, they could get their lines ready and the things he'd said previously about the Labour Party. They're completely wrong-footed. And he doesn't have an opportunity to say, only last week she was saying the Labour Party were bad for this or that or whatever. Yeah,
similar to the Christian Wakeford defection in January 2021, which was also pulled off at PMQs. It's interesting that Dan Poulter didn't do the same. Maybe he had a clinic booked, which is the Tory critique of Dan Poulter.
Because he's a doctor, not because of any personal...
Yeah, sorry, Dan Poulter, Dr. Dan Poulter, doing vital work in our NHS or indeed as a private locum somewhere, who knows. But, you know, it is interesting, this Natalie Elphicke thing, because also the fact that it's happening during PMQs means there's no, as you say, no opportunity to ask awkward questions. And with Natalie Elphicke, there are a lot of awkward questions, both about her policy stances and her personal conduct, particularly relating to her then husband, Chorley Elphicke, who was convicted for sexual assault. Natalie Elphicke said the court was on a bit of a mission and criticised the sentence he received, which is an interesting question for Keir Starmer. Mr. Rules, as Lisa Nandy famously called him way back when, and someone who cares deeply about the criminal justice system and its integrity to be facing, which I'm sure he will in due course.
The whole country knows that removing less than 1% of asylum seekers isn't stopping the boats, it's granting an amnesty, a Tory amnesty. But if he thinks the voters are wrong, if he thinks his own MPs joining the Labour Party are wrong, if he thinks anyone believes any of the nonsense that he spouts, why doesn't he put it to the test and call a general election?
Mr. Speaker, he talks about removing people. This is a person who campaigned to stop the deportation of foreign national offenders, Mr. Speaker. It shows how out of touch his values are with the British people. But, Mr. Speaker, it's yet another week where we hear nothing about his plan to do anything on the issues that matter to the country. Meanwhile, we're getting on, reforming welfare and getting people into work. He opposes it. We're controlling migration, legal and illegal. He opposes it. And as we heard, Mr. Speaker, we are boosting defence spending to strengthen our country. He opposes it, and that's the difference. He snipes from the sidelines. The Conservatives are building a brighter future.
I'm not sure if he faded out the cheering then, or there wasn't very much of it. On the glumometer, Oliver Dowden
is
I mean,
on the phone to Samaritans, I think.
It's hard to say close to tears, but he doesn't look very cheerful. Oliver Dowden, the Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, there's precious little for the Tories to smile about here. I mean, what's the glint of light amid all this darkness for the Conservatives?
Yeah.
If you've got any ideas, what about those exchanges?
If you were looking for a silver lining and all that, what would you take from it?
Because it's not as if Rishi Sunak going hard on migration, and look, notwithstanding the fact that voters aren't really tuning in, local elections are low turnout, maybe some of these people will think twice if they hear this from the Conservative Party during a general election campaign, but nothing about this attack on Labour on immigration suggests it's harming Labour's standing among the voters it's aimed at, i.e. middle-aged men who voted Leave. Indeed, Labour is doing better among them than ever before, and second to them among that demographic are Reform. So the more Rishi Sunak bangs on about this, the more you can't help but feel actually it's probably going to hurt him more in the long run.
Yeah, raising it up the agenda. Paul's been in touch. Paul in Faversham says about Natalie Elphicke. I'm totally shocked. I used to live in the Dover constituency. My mum was living there until recently. I thought a defection to Reform was far more likely. Somebody else says, please, gentlemen, give the most hard-working Prime Minister a little hearing. There we are.